Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Sales Chalk Talk Show brought to you by Redcap Sales Coaching. I'm Hugh Little, your head sales wizard at Redcap Sales Coaching and Elite Sales Academy, where you can learn to make selling easy, fun, and profitable. If you're a chiropractor, a realtor, sell HVAC products or services, or run any kind of a service oriented business, you can learn how to serve more people and dramatically increase your conversion ratio, sales, and revenue. Stay tuned and you'll find out how you can take the first step to get started growing your business into the successful enterprise you really want it to be. I'm broadcasting today from Sebring, the very best part of Central Florida. My awesome co host, Jim Hamlin, is in the studio today. He was my co host for many years, took a break for a while, and now he's back. He and Gene McNaughton are sharing the co hosting on the show. Originally from Sweet Home, Alabama, Jim now makes his home in Lubbock, Texas, where he's a heating and air conditioning and plumbing salesman extraordinaire, doing around $2.5 million in sales annually. He's been in the HVAC sales business for around 40 years and also teaches and coaches other HVAC salespeople to be effective and successful in their sales. Jim, what's going on up there in Lubbock?
Just as always, the weather's extremely fickle. I think this time last week it was about 103, and today the high is going to be like 68. So
Yikes.
we have a good time watching the weather, whatever it's going to do.
Absolutely. Hey, you're invited to continue making Sales Chalk Talk a part of your learning in 2022 and beyond. Every week, you'll be able to get inside the heads of some of the most brilliant people in the areas of sales, marketing, leadership, business, and success. You can listen to all the past and future Chalk Talks at redcapsalescoaching.com/podcast. Or you can listen on iTunes, and we're just about everywhere else you can listen to podcasts too. On upcoming shows, we'll have a great lineup of guests coming up for you here on Chalk Talk. So stay tuned and learn more and more about how to build your business and your sales. Today, we're most honored to have global marketing expert Paul Rupert with us. Let me tell you just a little bit about Paul. He's a veteran SaaS and mobile services executive and strategy consultant. He's the holder of 2 tech patents. His products enable global text messaging. He has career experience in both the private and public sectors, applying a range of multidisciplinary skills exercised at the highest levels of both arenas, from corporate boardrooms to the White House. He's generated over $400 million in direct sales. He's a skilled cross country border negotiator and technology innovator. For 2 decades, he's led global commercial, product, and marketing teams, M&A deals in B2B SaaS sales. Prior to entering the private sector, he earned a Harvard Master's graduate degree. He served over a decade in policy and political roles as a legislative assistant to a U.S. senator, economic development advisor to a cabinet secretary, a technology industry lobbyist, and a White House staffer. His private sector achievements are exceptional. He scaled startups from zero to billion-dollar valuations, forging global strategic partnerships and doing business in 80 countries. He's worked with private equity and billion-dollar enterprises and managed cross-border, cross-cultural teams. He's lived in the US, France, and China. Paul is the president of Global Point View Ltd., a strategy consulting firm providing insights to technology companies seeking guidance on focus, strategies, and plans via scaling partnerships and acquisitions. His international clients have included Facebook, MasterCard, Western Union, LivePerson, Infobip, and private equity and venture firms looking to leverage mobile services in their digital plans for conversational commerce. You can contact Paul on LinkedIn at bit.ly, that's bit.ly /sct-paul. I think you can tell you're in for another fun, fascinating half hour. So sit down, buckle up, and hold on, folks, because here we go. Hey, Paul, welcome to Chalk Talk.
Thanks very much for inviting me to be here today with you guys, Hugh, as well as nice to meet you, Jim.
We've been looking forward to it. Definitely have. And we're going to talk about building global businesses today. Now, obviously, the process of building a global business requires developing alliances and partnerships along the way. So, how can companies monetize strategic partnerships and alliance ecosystems?
Well, it depends. Uh, the opportunity is something that no business should ignore in the context of trying to go global, even if you're just selling cupcakes, or if you're in a much more complicated technology-based solution, like I was in, and that I've been building out international businesses and global businesses for over the last 20 plus years.
It's got to be a totally different mindset to talk about global businesses. I've worked with small businesses and I've helped them start up and I've helped them get going, but never did I think on the terms of a global business. So how do you take a tech startup, make it global from the start? And to me, that's just mind-boggling. And why is it important to be able to do that?
Sure. So I'll give you the textbook answer relative to going global from the start. The reality is that any business would be looking at its domestic market being defined by its geography, its borderlines. And even though we may not think about that, when I say we, I'm talking about an American perspective. The reality is that in other parts of the world, this is pretty routine, especially, for example, in Europe, where there may be state borders that separate different nations, but in reality, it's an open market. So they want to be able to get to the largest possible market as fast as possible. In the US, candidly, I'll go out on a limb in the context of we're a little bit lazy because we have the largest economy in the world, and because it's so vast, both geographically as well as so deep economically, it's something that we don't really think about because we can just harvest or mine our domestic market first. So normally you'd start looking at this and then figuring out, okay, what do I need to do to be able to ship it cross border? And ship could be services or it could be products, whatever it might be. And in that case, context, it just may be an effort to localize, perhaps on language basis or different kinds of cultural distribution channels. And that's how you might be selling the exact same stuff you might be selling in Lubbock, Texas, as you might be in London. It's just got a different shrink wrap on the cover of it. But as you get bigger and bigger on an international scale, that's when you shift your attention away from just your domestic market and start realizing that there may be larger markets than your home domestic market between selling, let's say, services between the Philippines and Saudi Arabia, for example, where there's lots of different types of economic and cultural connections between those two countries. Now, you talked about technology. In my case, where I started off my experience and my career in the telephony world, in the world of mobile telecommunications. And it just so happens that the first job, actually the second job, I should be precise, in that role was serving as an international roaming director. And what does that do? And the company was called Pacific Bell Mobile Systems, which was part of Pacific Telesis, which today you know as AT&T. And in that context, my job was to essentially negotiate contracts, B2B contracts, business to business contracts, with other mobile network operators all around the world. That translates into an agreement on how the technology is going to work when visitors from my home network, let's say San Francisco, would be getting off a plane back to London and being able to connect immediately, and immediately would be within milliseconds, so that the billing would be occurring between the two companies, so that your phone, as labeled and branded as Pacific Bell Mobile Services, was going to be working in the Vodafone world or in the world of Orange UK, etc. So I got into a startup after leaving that large enterprise-based haven in my first part of the telecommunications space. And what we did was then provide interoperability. So that translates into civilian speak as the means to be able to send a text message from a GSM-based phone, like in London, or in that company that I was with, Backbell Wireless, to a non-GSM phone, which would be, let's say, the old Nextel days, which is the radio format is called IDEN, or Verizon, which is called CDMA, or the original AT&T, which was called TDMA. And these are all the various types of functionalities and radio connectivity, the utilizing different spectrum and how the phone works. And we provided a solution that bridged those different dissimilar technologies, even though they were all mobile telephony, into one technology that was able to send and receive text messages. Now, why is that important? Because we recognized that we didn't really need to be trying to sell it just domestically. We had a market which was the size of the world. Because just because you're from Burkina Faso, which is in middle sub-Saharan Africa, you still want to be able to get on a plane or have your phone work if you're in Burbank, or vice versa. So we saw that instead of thinking from 0 to 1, like most startups are thinking about trying to find their way, which we had to go through in our own sense, but after a fashion, myself and others who came from the telephony business, we recognized that no, we need to go 0 to a billion, as we put it. And that was how we were able to assess the market and decide this is the approach. Now we can get into the, let's call it the campaign, which is how I characterized it in terms of how we were going to be able to segment the market on a global basis from those roughly 1,400 mobile network operators all around the world to essentially how do we spend time focusing on, let's say, 25. But that's part of the process.
So has it gone from like 1,400, as you just said, to 25? Is the differences shrinking?
When I say 25, I'm talking about we looked at the global market, and so we recognized that we could be selling into 1,400 mobile network operators around the world. But there were just two of us, meaning myself and one other sales guy who worked for me. And we recognized, okay, how are we going to identify and prioritize our resources so that we are able to secure opportunities in a scale that we can manage, just the two of us. So we took that 1,400 and then distilled it down to 25. And even amongst those 25 between the two of us, we recognized as we started getting traction with one, we shifted away attention from another. It was what I called parallel priorities. You know, there's no such thing as parallel priorities, but we were running all these things in parallel until we found a priority. And that's when we went all in, if you will. And so in this case, in this example that I'm talking about, this is a company called Mobile 365. We were able to get our first customer, which was O2 UK, which was the mobile network operator, which is now part of Telefonica globally, but this was in the UK. It was around 2001, 2002. We were then able to leverage that for, let's see, it was T-Mobile, which was also based in the UK, but it's a German-based company. And then from there, we shifted to where we felt the highest amount of messaging was occurring, which was in Asia, and we focused on the Philippines. Why the Philippines? Well, at that time, the highest amount of messaging per user per month was in the Philippines. Now, why would that be important? Well, that's great for the Philippine nation in of itself, that they were able to send messages at that level, and we're talking about 100, 160 as I recall, per user within the Filipino operators. But guess what? There's a large percentage of Filipino foreign workers where? In the United States. So we knew that we could leverage that that flow, that connectivity, that how can I put it? That channel between the U.S. and the Philippines, and benefit our customer in the U.S., which was at the time Verizon, our first domestic customer, as well as providing a great opportunity for the Filipino operators to be able to reach or provide reach for their friends and families of domestic subscribers, as well as those people who were living in the United States as a result of foreign work permits or whatever, for whatever reason. And that's how we were able to make the segmentation, do the analysis based on data, and then allocate the resources, whether it's time, money, people, talent, will, and even technology against those opportunities.
Paul, I have a service-oriented business, a coaching practice, and it's international. It's not global yet. What are some steps that a business like mine might take to scale to a global level? And what are some of the things that are potential challenges in doing that?
Yeah. Well, you were talking about partnerships and alliances at the beginning of our call.
Mhm.
One way of doing that is to perhaps partner or ally yourself with someone similar to you in another country. Or let's say that you feel that your solution, your capabilities, the advice and direction, the consultancy that you could provide might be enhanced by a partnership with another entity similar to yours, or even dissimilar. There might be an opportunity for mutual utility because you are dissimilar. That would be one way of approaching it. The other way would then be leveraging, social networking or social networks to be able to take advantage of you and being able to bring attention to you. And that could be done through a number of different ways. You're probably on LinkedIn. You might be also looking to get on Instagram or Twitter to be able to bring attention to yourself that gets beyond your traditional boundaries, if you will, in terms of the US. And there are even other ways that you might even consider. This is something we did early on. We took our website and had it translated both into Mandarin as well as Spanish, and also the English, obviously. And so we used those essentially, those were the three principal markets that we were going after. Spanish, because that was below the Rio Grande, Mexico, and all the way into Latin America. Chinese, because we wanted to be able to really demonstrate that we were truly global in the context of, and a little bit different because this is in the early 2000s. And I also had my assumption in terms of the growth of the Chinese market was it was inevitable that they were going to be a massive user of messaging, which I think came through. That's not a big guess by any means. And so that's why we were able to differentiate ourselves and demonstrate that we were truly global. So there are a lot of different ways, back to that shrink wrapping, even as a consultancy. Just put a different coat on, so to speak, a coat of paint or, a different shrink wrap relative to your capabilities.
Yeah, I'm sitting here listening to what you were doing in 2001.
Mhm.
Did you foresee at all where communication would be in 2022?
Um, to tell you the truth, I got into the text messaging business before there was a text messaging business. What I mean by that, I was product development director for a little while in the quote messaging space, and messaging then was voice messaging. I was the guy who was making decisions on the servers and the Octel application boxes that were enabling you to receive a voice message. And then all of a sudden, because this was all part of the same radio format, as I said, GSM technology, global system mobile, for those of you interested, we started realizing that within the community, meaning mobile network operators, there was discussion about utilizing this different layer of the technology for text communication, about 160 characters. And because of it just so happens I happen to be French. And so when I got this job as a product development director, I reached out to a sister-in-law who lived in France and started asking her about, tell me what kind of services they're offering inside France Telecom and things like that. And my objective was to take that, do a lift and shift, meaning just copy what they were doing and apply it into California. And as a result of my, let's say, expanded viewpoint, I saw that text messaging as a technology was starting to get traction, primarily through my network in Europe, in Scandinavia, and elsewhere. Now, that's where I then took it to my masters inside PBMS, saying, I think we should be doing something like this. They kind of agreed, but guess what? We couldn't bill for it. We didn't have the means to actually bill per message at that time, but we still promoted it, recognizing that this was already happening in other parts of the world, and the billing community, meaning companies like Amdocs and others that provided these applications for billing, would come around, which is what they did. Now, that means that I had a short-term perspective on an opportunity that I thought was developing. Did I ever foresee it being such a cultural, historical, and commercial phenomenon that it has? No,
Yeah.
of course not. Even in the context of, I helped build out a company that I was part of the executive management team that we eventually sold it for $500 million. I should have just turned around and started again, because had I done that, I'd probably be running a company that would be doing $1 billion in revenues, which is what some of the companies that I've been involved in are doing today. Why? Because we're talking about trillions of text messages that are transmitted into the ether on an annual basis. And you, as a customer, a consumer, could have a mobile phone, whether it's a smartphone or even what's called a feature phone, which is not a smartphone, kind of like the old phones. And you could be in developing countries like in sub-Saharan Africa, or you could be in the United States in downtown Manhattan, and you're going to get that message, which is why we're getting, why we utilize trillions of text messages on an annual basis for everything from one-time passwords to prove that you are who you are, to you engaging with United Airlines because your flight is delayed, or you just texting because you're reaching out for a loved one to just say hello, and etc.
Wow.
I
So,
wish I had that vision,
well,
but
you
no,
obviously have
I was just riding the wave, as I put it. You just
you have
surf the
some
wave.
kind of vision. So, well, speaking of vision and trends and whatnot, you've got what's going on today with climate change, the oil pandemic. How are those things going to reshape how global business is done through developed and undeveloped economies around the world?
Well, where we are today, there is the evolution of text messaging and voice and even video, even though we're not on video at the moment, but so many of us are doing video calls, multiple times during the course of a day. There is an element of the telecommunications business that I'm involved in called CPaaS, which is an acronym for Communications Platform as a Service. And the idea behind this is that as a provider, a technology provider, or perhaps let's say an enterprise, we recognize that consumers are king, and the biggest demand that they have is convenience. And what that translates into is, if they're going to be communicating with me, meaning an enterprise, a company is talking to me for whatever reason, or I want to have an engagement with an enterprise for whatever reason. It could be setting up my haircut, or it could be setting up time for me to get an oil change, or it could be anything that we're trying to engage, even complaints relative to enterprises. As a consumer, my objective is my choice, my message, my platform, anytime. So as an enterprise, we could be trying to talk to you via WhatsApp, which doesn't communicate and doesn't send to everyone. Or we could doing text message, which is universally accessible and available to everyone. Or we could be doing video, or we could be doing even old style legacy email, or new style artificial intelligence chatbots. And the space that I'm involved in right now is being able to integrate all of those and coordinate all of those all at the same time. So that's where we are, and is a technological initiative, and the developments are now moving towards customer data platforms, which are essentially means in which you might call in one day, or let's say you text in one day, the customer care agent might coming back to you via video call or any other platform, or even you might be engaging with what's called a person to application engagement, P2A engagement, where a chatbot and audio voice might be working with you through trying to resolve a troubleshooting or a technical problem. These are all the concept of where we are today, and we're looking at various use cases and various industry segments to pursue that.
Okay. Well, you're pursuing things. It sounds like you're pursuing an awful lot of things. So how do you spot trends and know exactly which one you want to chase, or which ones are going to be a dead end in a few years?
Well, you don't know that once you start off on the journey, the journey of innovation, if you will. I've written an old blog post about 10 years ago where I talk about innovation identification and innovation harvesting is really about um, Innovisioneering. And so you take a perspective, a vision of what is innovative. And innovative could be disruptive, that's revolutionary innovation, or it could be evolutionary, meaning one step ahead, one step ahead, one step ahead at a time. It's like a car. The Model T may have gone 40 miles an hour, and now you can be driving a Bugatti that's going 210 miles an hour. That was all done through a long period of time of evolution in terms of the quality, the capabilities of the technology, meaning a car. And then, you make an assessment relative to how do you orient yourself to the market and that vision of innovation and the type of risk and resources that you want to put into that innovation. So you don't really start off with the idea, when am I going to be killing my children? Meaning, when am I going to kill my idea because it's not going very far? You have to be able to make that assessment along the way. And that's all part of the process as to undertaking the risk and having a sense of, I always talk about starting with the answer. So let's start with the answer. Where do you want to go? You've got this idea. It might be a concept. Now, do you have the technology to put it in place? If you've got the technology to put it in place, now let's start talking about how are we going to take it to market and productize it so it's repeatable, the same type of functionality, the same type of interest, the same type of demand, and yet still adjustable to each and every use case, if you will. That's just kind of a very quick and dirty analysis of innovation.
Well, it's still very fascinating to me, and you're dealing with all this and all these different type people, tech ideas and things. How do I still go back to Hugh's first question and build those alliances and partnerships to take this thing to a global market? I've got an idea. I've got the innovation behind that idea. How do I go and take it to global?
Well, cowboy, it's all about selling, isn't it?
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
to get to the root, which is identifying opportunities of mutual interest and mutual utility, and then being able to articulate what that opportunity is in terms of the value proposition. And you may be communicating an idea that someone had not thought about, and now you're tapping into, as Steve Jobs would call it, unarticulated demand. They had never thought about it, but they really need it. And so that process is as much about, this is going to be a little esoteric, but if you think about Sun Tzu, so Sun Tzu was a Chinese general, roughly 600 AD, I believe, is when he was around, and he wrote a bunch of parables called On War. And one of them is, know thyself, know thy enemy, do not fear 100 battles. So in the same context, know thyself in terms of what you think the opportunity is. Not really an enemy in this context, it could be a partner. And then present yourself to the partner in terms of, here are some ideas that I've got. They might be technological, they might be strategic, or they might be immediately commercial. But you find what those bridges are, you illuminate them, and do not fear 100 battles is essentially dive in and start the process. That's how it works at the end of the day.
Let's go to war.
Yeah, well, in the old days, like at Procter and Gamble, they might have said qualify, tie down, close, or power close. Almost the same type of approach, if you will.
Mentioning fast cars a minute ago, and I just wanted to let you know that Jim once drove a 1965 Ford pickup truck 275 miles an hour and ended up back in 1965.
Okay. I wish that would have been a hell of a car.
Folks, we'll be right back with our very special guest, marketing expert Paul Rupert, and talk more about how you can build your marketing program successfully. We want to encourage you to visit his LinkedIn page at bit.ly, that's bit.ly /SCT-Paul. As you can tell from the first part of the show, he is a highly knowledgeable and skilled marketing expert who can help you scale your business as he's done for countless others. So be sure to check out his page, read his articles and posts, and then message him and arrange a conversation to see whether his services are a good fit for you or not. So check out Paul's LinkedIn page at bit.ly /SCT-Paul right after the show. Or you can even pause the recording and check it out right now and take advantage of all the good stuff there. I promise you'll be really glad you did. Now, if you leave, be sure you come back and listen to the rest of the show, though, because Paul and Jim have some more great stuff for you. We're back with our very special guest, global marketing expert Paul Rupert. Again, you can contact Paul on LinkedIn at bit.ly /SCT-Paul.
I'm going to ask one more question. I know Hugh's got one after I'm done, but you mentioned harvesting innovation and the tools of Innovisioneering, which that was evolution versus revolutionary or just kind of disruptive. Is there a better way to go?
Between the two?
Yes, they both.
Well, that there too, that also depends where you sit. So there's a great book by a Harvard Business School professor named Clayton Christensen, and the title of the book is Innovator's Dilemma. And then he goes on to write about 6 or 7 other books over the last 25 or 30 years. I believe he passed away, unfortunately, about 2 years ago. But he talks about focusing on the performance engine, which in the context of innovation, that's a failure. In the context of you're just so focused on what you're doing on a day-to-day basis that you miss the opportunity, back to that evolutionary perspective, step by step by step forward. And oftentimes the ones who are more effective at creating a disruptive innovation and a revolutionary innovation are the players that you don't see, who are adjacent to you, who are similar to you in some context, or they see the market a little bit differently, and they enter it, and you eventually lose out to them. Right now, for example, in the space that I'm in, there are these entities called messaging aggregators, the companies that I've been involved in. And there are other companies who are outside of that space, for example, like customer care companies. Now, why would a customer care company be interested in a telecommunications messaging aggregator? Because they're trying to figure out how to be able to pivot their capabilities, which have been really driven by voice calls, which are very inefficient. If you work inside a customer care call center, there might be 100% turnover in 3 months. And they realize that if they can change the model by utilizing text messaging solutions, that becomes what's called asynchronous instead of synchronous, meaning you calling and demanding something right now to be solved, and instead you could be texting something at 2 o'clock in the morning with the sense that it's going to be resolved by 8 in the morning. So it really kind of depends on where you sit in the equation, whether disruptive is a better approach to innovation or evolution is a better approach to innovation. Not to be a cop-out, but
Right.
you get the idea.
Makes sense. Yes, I do.
Well, it has been really great having you with us on Chalk Talk. Before we let you go, we do have one more question for you, and it's one that we ask all of our guests on every show. And the question is based on one of my favorite books, The One Thing by Gary Keller of Keller Williams Real Estate. If you could give our listeners just one piece of advice that you believe is the most important in gaining success in their businesses, their sales, their relationships, their lives, what's the one thing, Paul?
I'm not at my desk at my house at the moment, in my home office, but I have what's called a challenge coin. I'm not sure if you're familiar with challenge coins, but members of the military, the armed services around the world, in many cases, well, even intelligence agencies, carry these coins in terms of your challenge to produce your coin, and you don't, you have to buy drinks for everybody. And many years ago, when I was a younger man and serving in the government, I had the chance to meet a member of the SAS, and he gave me a challenge coin after we did some work together. And the SAS motto is "Who dares wins." Now we can go back even further. There is another one which is "Fortune favors the audacious." And as I look at my own personal journey, as well as in many cases the success of, as I mentioned, this cockroach startup, as I used to call ourselves, becoming this phenomenally successful entity, at $500 million, nothing to sneeze at. And that was in 2006. The reality is that resilience and audacity relative to your vision, and back to the beginning topic in all of this, why go global? Well, go global because you can get from 0 to a billion instead of narrowing your vision from 0 to 1. So that would be my one piece of advice with 3 different elements to it. Let's call it that.
Well, folks, here at Sales Chalk Talk, we believe in taking action. So go to Paul's LinkedIn page at bit.ly/sct-paul. As you've heard on today's call, he is a highly knowledgeable and skilled marketing expert who can help you scale your business as he's done for countless others. So be sure to check out his page, read his articles and posts, then message him and arrange a conversation to see whether his services are a good fit for you or not. Take massive action. Don't procrastinate. Do it now. Go to Paul's LinkedIn page at bit.ly/sct-paul right away. I promise you'll be really glad you did. I also promised to give you some information about how to increase your business and sales. So here it is. If you'd like to start scaling your sales and revenue, you can have a free sales strategy session with me. Go to redcapsalescoaching.com and you'll find a button on every page where you can schedule your free, no obligation, valuable session. You'll also find a ton of information at redcapsalescoaching.com that will help you tremendously in increasing your sales. If you're in the Lubbock, Texas area and you want to enjoy total comfort in your home or office, no matter what the weather's like outside, give Jim Hamlin a call at 205 999 1402. Paul, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk with Jim and me and our audience and share all this great stuff with us. Come back and talk to us again sometime soon.
I'd love to, and thanks very much for the invitation. And I hope your audience enjoyed the conversation.
Jim, what parting thoughts do you have today?
Hugh, I don't know how you do it, but you just keep coming up with really, really smart people for us to get to talk to. It was very, very impressive. Thank you very, very much, Paul.
Well, that's very gracious of you, Jim. Thanks very much.
Well, folks, that's about it for today's Sales Chalk Talk. We'll be back soon with another awesome Chalk Talk. Our special guest will be Matt McLaughlin of Illustra Consulting. We hope you'll join us then. Until then, make it fun and make it profitable. So long, Paul. So long, Jim. So long, everybody. And good selling.